we need to create two security groups. The first security group we want to create is our instance security group. And actually, let's create our load balancer security group. All right. So I'm going to call this my ALB SG, my application load balancer security group. Okay. So I'm going to create a first security group, a security group I'm only going to use for my load balancer. Best practice is if you have multiple resources that are performing multiple tasks that needs a security group, you always have to create a dedicated security group for each resource. Okay. So if there is a VPC that's already populated in here, but this doesn't look like my VPC. So I'm going to select it and clear it out. I'm clearing it out. Once I clear it out, then I can see a selection to select my own VPC because it was the default VPC. So if you make a mistake and create the security group without changing the VPC, you will not see it when you're creating your EC2 instance. So pay attention, please. Select my VPC here. And next, we need to add some routes in our Elastic Load Balancer. All right, our application load balancer is going to have a DNS, right? That DNS will be what will be needed to configure to query from the web browser. We are going to discuss about DNS later on, but just take note of what routes we are adding here on our Elastic Load Balancer. We need a route on HTTP, okay? Since this information we are launching is going to need to be queried from a web browser because we are going to host a web application. All right, so in this rule, let us add an HTTP protocol type. All right, and this is going to be running on port 80. And on the source, make sure that we allow from 000, or you can select from anywhere IPv4. Okay, we're only dealing with IPv4 versions for now. All right, you can write some description here, guys. Get used to writing some description. Right, you can say allow traffic from anywhere, isn't it? That's what we're doing. We're allowing traffic from anywhere to hit this load balancer. We're going to use this security group on a load balancer, so we are simply allowing traffic to hit it anywhere. So I need to create a tag, a name for my security group. So in addition, at the bottom here, I'm going to add a new name tag, and the value, I'll call it my ALB dash SG. Okay, same name as my group name. Next, click on create security group. So I have created the security group of my application load balancer. The next thing I'm going to do, I need you guys to pay.
Once I was about to click create security group, it took me back to the description.
Yes, just come back to click on security group again. All right, the next step, guys, I'll need you, yeah.
I can't create it if I cannot get, it says allow SSH access to developers. A description is required. On the basic details.
On the security group?
Yes.
Wait, did you create a security group? So where exactly?
I'm talking about where it says description info.
Yes, you have to give a description here. If you don't give anything here, you cannot create a security group. You have to give a value on that description when you're creating a security group.
So I can still use my ALB SG.
Yeah, you can write anything. Description is just saying what is this you're creating, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's just description is like you know, who are you? So there's nothing required you can write there. You can write there, you know, test me, anything. He's just saying that you cannot save that without a description, so you have to provide some value.
Okay, thank you.
All right, no problem. The next step here, guys, I want you guys to pay attention. This is not something that you learn from anywhere, really, right? There's a lot of people that have worked for a very long time and that they have not discovered how to do this, what I'm going to show you guys, right? It's very important. And sometimes you can ask in an interview, and a lot of people do not know it. So kind of pay attention to what I'm going to do the next time, the next step right here. So remember, we need to create two different security group. The first security group I've created is my application load balancer security group. Remember, the application load balancer is sitting in front of my targets. My EC2 instances is talking to my elastic load balancer, and my elastic load balancer is talking to the public. So if anybody hits a request on the web browser, that request first go to the application load balancer, then it goes to my EC2 instance. So the application load balancer needs to accept requests from everybody, but our EC2 instance doesn't really need to accept requests from everybody. Our EC2 instance only needs to accept requests from our elastic load balancer. So if anybody is trying to connect to the EC2 instance directly, they cannot get to it. There is no way that you can connect to that EC2 instance unless you go through the application load balancer, right? If you're trying to limit connectivity only through an elastic load balancer to an EC2 instance, how would you configure that otherwise as an interview question? How would you manage that? Where and how? Okay, this is how we are going to do it. So within your security group, we're going to create a new security group. This security group is going to be a dedicated security group for our EC2 instance. I'm going to call this my Linux server security group. My Linux server SG. Okay. All right. Remember, I always copy the name of my security group and put in the description because I need to put some value in there. Now remove the value of your VPC and make sure that the security group is created in the right VPC that you intend it to be created in. Okay, I'm going to select my VPC. Now we need to add a rule to allow this EC2 instance to be accessed by who we need to be accessed by. So add a new rule. In this rule type, right, we equally need this EC2 instance to be accessed through port 80, which is the HTTPS. But by who? Who needs access to this EC2 instance? Not by everybody, but by who? There is a second section at the bottom here, which says SG, security group, right? We can select a security group as a source for an instance or whatever resource the security group is attached to, so that we are limiting connectivity only to this thing. Okay, so now I'm going to select my ALB SG because only wherever I use the security group, only that resource will gain access to my EC2 instance. Okay, allows access from my ALB. Okay, allow access from my ALB only. Nothing else can connect to the EC2 instance. There's only one route on my EC2 instance security group. If I add another rule, here and I say SSH, right, from 000, that will maybe complicate the purpose. Means that people can connect from the elastic load balancer and can still connect directly from anywhere to the server. And I don't want that. I only want connectivity from the load balancer only. So I would only allow one and a single route on the security group of my EC2 instance. Okay, I'm going to give you a name tag. And the name tag I always give for my security group matches the security group name. All right.
Bill, please, when you get a chance, could you repeat the interview question? I write those down.
Okay. How do you limit connectivity to your EC2 instance to a load balancer? And the answer is by making sure that the source of the load balancer route of the security group route is the security group of your load balancer.
Thank you.
All right, perfect. Okay, now we are done with our security group configuration. So the next step is for us to create our load balancer and to create our EC2 instances, load balancer, and auto scaling group. Guess what? We can create all of these three things in one step. I'm going to show you guys today. Yesterday and the day before, we have seen how to create these individual resources independently, right? But today we're going to see how we can create all of them together with the EC2 instance. First, of course, if we need an auto-scaling group, we need to make sure that we either define a launch template or we define an auto-scale launch configuration. So I always prefer to go with launch template, okay? So let's create a launch template. And I'm going to call this my LT. And I'll make this, I'll give a template description. I'll give the template description as my ALB LT, right? Okay, let me just write it to completely. My application load balancer launch template, okay? My application load balancer launch template, all right? I'm giving it a description. Description is something that you remember what you're creating, right? I'm putting a memo for myself or for anyone else that needs to come and access this thing, all right? Okay. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to click on quick start and I'll select my Amazon Linux machine 2 AMI and my instance type, I will choose the T2 micro and my key pair, select your key pair. I would select my key pair. And on the network, make sure you select a subnet. And this is important. Make sure you select private subnet 1, okay? Private subnet 1 or private subnet 2. Don't select your public subnet. We are going to select our private subnet, right? We want to place our resources inside our private network this time around. Make sure you select private subnet. So we don't need to create a new security group here because we already created one, right? So click on the security drop down here. And we are going to, this is our launch template for our EC2 instances that will sit behind our load balancer, isn't it? So we select the My Linux SG, server SG, all right? And you can select GP3 and resource stack, give it a name. Give it a name. And for the value, call it my ALB Linux, my ALB Linux server, all right? Let's call it my ALB Linux server. And I want to tag my EBS volume and my instances together. And the last thing we're going to do at the bottom here, I give you guys here in the lab, right? Make sure you go into the files. There is an Nlb Bootstrap file here. We're going to use this one instead. Has a different content in there. So I'm going to select this. And I'm going to use it as my Bootstrap, as my user data. In here, I'm going to paste it. Okay.
Will, is this different from the one from yesterday? You said there are 2 in there?
Yes, there are 2 in there.
Oh,
Select the one that says NLB Server Bootstrap.
okay.
And what does NLB stand for, Prof?
Network Load Balancer.
Okay.
All right, so that's it. Click on Create Launch Template. All right. In View Launch Template, we have completed our launch.
Where did you paste that just now?
Go to Advanced Configuration at the very bottom. All right.
Prof, I missed something. Under key pair, did you include a key pair?
Yes, please. Select your key pair.
Okay.
All right. Next, now we are going to actually create our cluster. All right. We have
Hold on, quick. Mine just failed. Is there a problem?
Please do it again. You missed something, and I'm not certain what you missed exactly. So just redo it again. All right, guys, please pay attention to this next step, what I'm about to do for the Elastic, for the auto scaling group configurations. We're going to create an auto scaling group, but this time around, we are going to create it with a twist, okay? We have to create a cluster of EC2 instance to make sure that it is scalable or is in the auto scaling group, and it's also attached to an application load balancer. So this is how we create it. Okay, so once you click on your auto scaling group at the bottom of your page, please click on create auto scaling group. I'm going to call this my ALB auto scaling group, my ALB ASG, okay, my auto scaling group, my application load balancer auto scaling group. Now I created the launch template, and on the launch template, let's go ahead and create and select our launch template that we created called my LT. Okay, select my LT. We only have one version of this launch template, and it's the default version. Okay, it's only one time we've created launch template. We're going to see how we will create a second version of it to use it in our next illustration. All right, we are going to create an application load balancer for now. All right, so I selected my launch template. I'm going to click on next. This next step, please select your network configuration for your auto scaling group. I'm going to click drop down of my VPC and select my VPC, my default VPC. And for availability zones and subnets, I want to make sure that I select the subnets that I want my cluster of EC2 instance deployed in. I created two private subnets because this time around we are deploying all our resources into the private network. The only resource that is going to be in our public network is going to be our load balancer. All right. So for now, click on this drop down of your availability zone and subnets. Click on the drop down, and we're going to select private subnet 1 and private subnet 2. Select private subnet 1 and select private subnet 2. And click on next. Select private subnet 1 and private subnet 2 and click on next. Now we don't have any Elastic load balancers running. So, and we do want to attach this cluster to a load balancer. So we can do that at once here, right? So at this time, we can select attach to a new load balancer because we equally plan to create one at this time where we are creating our auto scaling group as well. So our instances will, this process will create a load balancer, create a target group, create our instances, and make sure the instances are inside our target group, right? It's a very, integrated process, but this way doesn't make you learn anything, but this way takes your learning experience and put it into motion. Okay, so this time around we are going to select load balancer option. You realize that this is optional, but we are going to decide to go with it at this moment and select attach to a new load balancer, and we're going to select the application load balancer route. All right, now I'm going to call the application load balancer my.
Hey, Will.
Yes.
Sorry, please. Could you repeat step 2?
All right, guys, please, if you go through your private, select your private subnet 1 and private subnet 2. Private subnet 1 and private subnet 2. Okay, that's all you select there. Make sure that you have selected your VPC. Click next. We're going to attach a new load balancer. Okay, a new load balancer, and I'm going to call this my ALB. All right, my application load balancer. I'm giving a name application load balancer. All right, make sure that this load balancer you're creating is an internal as internet facing load balancer. It is not internal. We are creating an internet load balancer, internet facing load balancer, because this is a web application that we want to create and deploy and allow access from the outside world, okay, beyond the company. We want people from outside the company to get access to this application through a website. So that's why we are selecting internet facing option. All right, on our load balancer, we equally need to select the subnets that we want to deploy this load balancer in. We have already configured a network for our EC2 instances that are in the auto scaling group. Now we need to configure a network for our ALB. So this time around, instead of selecting the private subnet, we are going to select our public subnet. Guys, you have to pay attention to these steps, otherwise you're going to forget. Select your public subnet here. Select public subnet here. And if you cannot practice along through the lab, and you can practice later. I think it's more important if you pay attention now, because if you're practicing, you might not really listen to what I'm saying. And those of you who don't have time to watch the video later, right, it will be more difficult for you to understand the processes, because it makes more sense when what I'm saying for you to pay attention. Then, because if you're practicing along the way, I don't know for you guys, but for myself, if I'm doing some work and listening to somebody talk, I will barely hear what they're saying. All right, so please select the public subnet here. Select public subnet 1, select public subnet 2. All right, you should see at the bottom here, it should say public. All right, at the bottom here, it should say public. At the other one bottom here in availability zone 1B, it equally say public. All right, so this is an application load balancer we are creating. So the protocol type is going to be HTTP. Okay, it's not TCP for the network load balancer. It's going to be grayed out, but the default will be HTTP, and it's going to be on port 80. Equally, we do not have a
Prof.
target group. Yes.
Yeah, Prof. Where are the availability zones and subnets again? You said we should select public subnet 1 and public subnet 2, but when you click the drop down, there was just public subnet. So yeah, there's no 1 and 2. So are you saying that on the US East 1 we select public subnet and US East 1B we select public subnet?
Yes.
Or it's supposed to be public subnet 1 and public subnet 2?
Public. If it says
Okay.
public, it is public.
Okay.
If it says
Okay.
public, it is public. Okay.
Okay. So both are public.
Yes. All right. So on the listener and router, make sure that let's go ahead and create our target groups. Okay. And remember that our target group sits behind the ALB. Our targets group sits behind our application load balancer. An application load balancer receives traffic on network because of the existence of something is called a target group. A target group is basically a container which sits and accepts traffic that has been routed and terminated on a elastic load balancer. In this scenario, an application load balancer. Okay, so we need a target group. So we do not have an existing one, otherwise it exists on the drop down here, but you have the ability to create one. So let us go ahead and click on create a target group. I'm going to call this my TG, my target group. I'm going to call this new target group that I'm creating my TG, which stands for target group. Okay, guys. Now, at the health check type here, do not worry about this one for now. It is very optional. The grace period just means that once any instance gets registered in the target as healthy, right? How long is it going to take before a health check is being performed on it? Okay, so do not worry about it. It's very minimal and in simple English for you to understand, to read through it and understand what it means. You can put 60 seconds here. Click on next. Our group size, right? We talked about a couple of days ago, we talked about what group size in an auto scaling group mean. Basically, we have 3 different configurations. If there's nothing that you learn about auto scaling group, at the minimum, you should understand what this means. This is going to broaden your experience, your understanding of what an auto scaling group is. If you understand what desired capacity means, minimum capacity and maximum capacity, right? If you don't understand what auto scaling group is, just read what is desired capacity, what is minimum capacity, and what is maximum capacity. There is a broad explanation that I provided on the labs, right? Before you click on next step, there are some explanations on these guys here. You can just spend a couple minutes, just read through them and try to understand what they mean before you select them. So desired capacity, again, I'm explaining it again today. Desired capacity is the number of EC2 instances you want running, right, at any given point of time. If I say for this cluster, or for the cluster of the application that we are running, we need a minimum, right? Not a minimum. We need at all time a minimum of a desired capacity, not a minimum, sorry. We need at all time, I would like for 2 instances to be running in this cluster at all given time. This is subjective, like what you would like. It's not necessary, right? It's not like it's a hard requirement. It can reduce, right? It is possible that the desired capacity can reduce, but how many instances do we want running at a given point? We're going to put 2. Minimum capacity is the objective, meaning that what is a must that cannot be a minimum? What cannot, what is the certainty of whatever cannot happen? Meaning, I need a minimum of a certain amount of EC2 instance to be running in this cluster. 2 means that it is possible that at some time it could be less than that normal running. But at that time, I would like for 2 to running. If somebody terminates 1 and this minimum number is beneath this number here, then another instance is not going to spin up. Equally, the cluster can allow 1, but we are going to allow 2 here because the desired capacity and our minimum, we want to be the same. And our maximum capacity cannot be lower than a minimum, right? So we make it 3. So if this cluster is to go up, please do not go above 3. Do not supersede 3. I don't want more than 3 instances running in this cluster, and I don't want less than 2. So, and I would like for 2 to be running, but hey, if there is a performance need, if this cluster is incurring a lot of traffic, right, please add 1 more. That's it, and stop there. Okay. Now click next, and we are going to create auto scaling group. We are going to create our auto scaling group. Now, the status is going for updating capacity. Now, if I launch my EC2 portal, you see that 2 instances are running. Why? Because I made my desired capacity 2. This is why these 2 instances have launched. There are 2 different instances that suddenly launch, okay? This is because my desired capacity is 2. I desired that 2 instances to run, so they decided they come on. So let's go and see the resources that we just created. Click on load balancer. You realize that the load balancer was created and it's in the process of provisioning. We called it my ALB. You should have an application type of a load balancer that is running. You should equally have a target group behind that load balancer. Okay, if you click a load balancer, You see here a target group. And if you have a bunch of load balancers and target group running, and you don't know which one exactly will be your target group, you can click on the load balancer, click on the listener, and on the rule of your listener of your load balancer, there is something here called your target group. You can see the value for your target group. You can simply click on it here. Whenever I click on anything, I hold down my control button, so it creates a new tab. If you keep seeing me see this happening to me, I hate to navigate from pages where I need to come back to it. Okay, so I will open a new tab here for that target group that I just opened. I just clicked on, and let's look at this target group, and let's look at the targets. So there is those two instances where, so not only did the process create an ALB and target group for me, but it also created EC2 instances and made sure that EC2 instances were deployed inside the target group, which is sitting behind my application load balancer. So it is a process. It's a process where I have taken less time to create multiple things. Okay, I have created scalability, reliability, and high availability. The fact that you have created two EC2 instances, right, in different availability zone, that is called HA. HA means high availability. High availability means that your resources are available in multiple locations, in multiple availability zone. That is the first process we did with our subnets, isn't it? The second process we did was make sure that we limited security. We provide some security. We created our EC2 instances with a key pair. We created our EC2 instances at a private subnet. We created a subnet, a security group for our EC2 instance, and only allowed the ALB to access it, right, for security. Then we created our auto scaling group and made sure that, you know, we put some capacity configurations there, right? We made our desired capacity, minimum capacity, and maximum capacity to make sure that, you know, if our cluster is able to encounter a higher traffic than intended, then our, you know, our instance can increase to 3 resources. We don't want to expand it too much, but just for 3, depending on the environment, guys. This is only test, right? These numbers can change depends on where you find yourself and what application, what process. If it's a heavy application, a light application, right? All of this is customized, right? There is no one way that you're going to find in any environment. Please know that in any environment, all of these configurations will change. They might change depending on the scenario, depending on the application, depending on the team, depending on the company, depending on the size of the application, depending on the type of application that is installed in there. Sometimes it might not even be a web application. We're doing web application here so that I can show you guys an example of an end product. All right, show you guys how these things can be seen at the end of the day. All right, I don't know why my server is showing unhealthy, but
Yeah, same.
yeah, but don't worry, we'll find out why.
So this is kind of what happened to me, the lab that we did, that I posted in the WhatsApp.
Okay, so so this is a very good example of walking through. Whenever you have a problem like this, let's walk through together, because you will encounter this scenario all the times in workplace. You would build something and it is not working. You go through a series of finding out what the heck is happening that is not working, right? It could be a security group. It could be, there are a few things that could be causing this problem, all right? It could be a security group. It could be your subnet configurations. There are a few things. I know what the problem is, but you guys do not know the problem. So if you encounter a problem like this, right, you might take some time, try to figure it out on your own, right? Try to exercise some troubleshooting skills, maybe see why this server, this unhealthy status here is saying that your load balancer and your EC2 instance are not communicating. There is something that is blocking communication between these two guys. So now, first thing, what do? Let's first of all check this EC2 instance. If everything we configured for it through that auto scaling group. We did not configure this manually. We configured it through a third party. We used the auto scaling group. So there's possible that there's something there that did not come as intended. Okay. So let's go ahead and check. And the first thing we want to check is our security group. Let's check our security group. The security group is allowing the security group we are using the security group of my Linux server. Let's see this security group and see what is allowing. It's allowing port 80, all right, which is okay. HTTP, all right, port 80. And what is it allowing? It's allowing the security group of ALB. But then where is ALB? ALB is our security group of our application load balancer. Is this application load balancer? Did we see anywhere in the process that asked us to attach a security group for our application load balancer? Not quite, right? We didn't really see anywhere that asked us that please define the security group of your application load balancer. So most likely a random security group was allocated for our Elastic load balancer. So that is one of the disadvantages of this process. It means that you have to go back and do one more configuration. You need to go and make a change to the application load balancer to modify the security group. Let's go and do this if that resolves the problem. So if we come to our security group here, or on our description of our ALB, go to your ALB, click on your ALB, you go to the description of your ALB, and you realize that you scroll down, you realize that there is a place to put a security group. But what security group are we using here? It's the default security group. This is really not a security group that we want to use for our ALB. We created a dedicated security group for our ALB because this security group does not have the rules that we want it to have. We want to give it a different security group. So you would click on modify security group on ALB. We can modify security group of subnets for application load balancers, okay? So click on edit security group. We're going to disable this security group and we will select my ALB SG, okay? Click on my ALB.
Prof, you want to go back one step? I missed the step before.
All right, on the description of your ALB, once you select your ALB, click on the description, and at the bottom of it, when you see security group, click on edit security group. Now select my ALB and you click on save. Now the security group of your ALB has changed to the my ALB SG. Okay. Now let's also verify that our subnets that we defined for our ALB is the public subnets. You can equally come to the subnet parameter. It says clearly here edit subnets, right? Edit means that you can manage it, you can make changes, or you can realign what you want to define for it. Okay. So on the subnet portion here, click on edit subnets, and let's verify that it is actually our public subnets that is here. And you can see here that in each availability zone we created 2 subnets. If you click on the drum down here, there is a private subnet and there's a public subnet. You have to make sure that it is your public subnet that is defined here. Okay, and on here as well you have your public subnet 2. Click on save. Click on save. All right, now those 2 things we verified. Let's go back and see if our target group is healthy still, right? It has some grace period. Let's see if it's going to do health check after those amounts of seconds. Let's check the health check configuration here. So it's doing health check every 30 seconds. Okay. So it's doing health check every 30 seconds. Let's wait for a bit and see if the health changes. And the other thing also to make sure is we are quite sure that our availability zone of our instance, which is 1A and 1B, also matches the availability zone of our elastic load balancer, which is there. So give it a few more seconds and let's see if that resolves the problem.
Yeah, fixed it. It's better now.
Absolutely. Awesome. So this is availability zone 1A and 1B. So let's wait for a second. Now our instance has changed to healthy.
Mine says 1B and 1A.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's fine. Doesn't matter the order, but at least they're in two different AZs. It doesn't matter the order.
I'm still on healthy though.
Yeah, just give it some time. Depending, you see on the health check tab here, there is some configuration of how much time or interval we want health check to happen. If you put 300 here, it's going to take longer. So the lesser time it takes for you to do health check is good, but for this test is good, but it also varies per application, guys. So most of these parameters, I'm changing the values because there is no standardization, right? There are multiple applications that I've worked in setting up in the LB, and all of them, almost all of them have been different. Depending on the application, some application might take longer time to deploy. So they want to have a longer grace period so that health check is not happening so quickly. This application might take more than 30 minutes to become healthy. So you put in 30 seconds here, it's more than 30 seconds to become healthy. If you put 30 seconds here, after every 30 seconds, the health check is shown unhealthy. And if the auto scaling group is checking on this criteria to see if to spin up instances or not, it'll just be deploying new instances every 30 seconds, new instance, right? It's going to just cause trouble. So all of these parameters would change. But the most important things that you need to understand is what are the values? What are these, right? What are they doing? So that if you have to make changes to it, you know where to do it, and you have some reasoning behind why you're doing it. Okay. So
Prof, how do we determine the health check duration?
right here.
I mean, how do we determine that? Okay, this one is going to.
You need to have a conversation with the application team, with the application guy, whoever you're installing that application for, right? They need to understand the nature of the application, or you need to understand and ask the right questions, right? How long does it take this application to be healthy, right? They will tell you. A lot of the work that you're going to be doing in AWS, depending on what you do, has to come with conversations. If you're not somebody that can ask questions and have relatable conversations about why you're doing things, it'd be difficult for you to do your work. For you to get your work done properly, you need to understand certain parameters, because all of this is not standardization. There's no standard for it. It varies. So you need to have conversations before you make decisions. Otherwise, you'll be doing you'll be doing the right thing and at the same time doing the wrong thing. All right, so let us test our application load balancer. So if you want to copy the DNS name for the application load balancer here and paste it on the web browser to see if it's working, right? If you paste it, you should be able to get to your application. That custom bootstrap data I give you guys, right, has some application that is picking up the instance name of your EC2 instance. If you check your EC2 instance, one of them have this ID, the one in 1B or 1A, whichever one you got. Get the DNS name of your load balancer.
That is so cool, Will.
Right, AWS is cool.
It definitely is.
Awesome. So you do this step, right? When you succeed, you pat yourself in your head. This is a good thing that you've done. You've designed a whole application, right? You have designed a whole application to completion, right? We are going to go through a process once we go through database called 3T application, right? If you're able to complete that without the entire implementation, without looking through the steps, right? You can tell yourself that you're ready for something. You're ready for the next step, right? Even if you're able to complete this entire step, what we just did today, without necessarily looking at the different steps, you can tell yourself that you can do something. Now, another thing that you guys should always also keep in mind that there is 85% of the time, 85 to 90% of the time, sometimes when you implement things or migrate things to AWS or design architecture, implement them, there's going to be issues. There's going to be problems. You will encounter errors. You encounter things like, the health check is not there. Somebody is not able to connect. Something is not able to do what it's supposed to do, right? It is very normal. A lot of times when we do migration in the workplace, even us being a group of 10 people, 20 people on one single call, doing things together, things still fail. We still have issues. We still troubleshoot it. We still, troubleshoot. Sometimes we even go back. We just can't get through with it, and we come back the next day and continue. Sometimes we can do it for weeks, and still there is no resolution, right? So you yourself, sometimes when you encounter issues, it doesn't mean that something has broken or something, is not working. There might be a little issue somewhere that you forgot. There's a step that you forgot to implement. There is a pre-configuration task that you did not do properly before you entirely started the project. Or there might be a security group that's not allowing a rule. There might be something that is not installed properly on the EC2 instance. There might be something with the subnet configuration, or maybe you did not even configure your route table, right? Now, if I go, you see here, this is working, right? Let's go to our VPC, right? Let's go to our VPC. Let's go to our internet or route tables. Let's go to our route table. Say we go to our private route table, right? In our routes, I click on edit route, and I remove this internet gateway, right? I configured my route table. I did not configure it properly, and in the public route table, I did not put my internet gateway. I come back here and try to query this DNS. All right. I take this DNS, hit it on the new web browser. All right. Hit it on the new web browser and see what happened. I haven't changed anything in my environment, but I just removed that internet gateway. Guess what? Nothing happened. It's going to time out. I cannot get to my application load balancer because what I explained to you guys in the beginning is that internet gateway is the only way that internet gets into your environment by putting it in that internet route table, There is a lot of times that you will, there's a lot of times where you would encounter issues like this. You will not know where exactly to check. There is nothing telling you that, hey, this is the problem. Sometimes some logs might give you an idea. Sometimes, you might get a hint from here and there, but from an architect, from being an architect, from an architectural perspective, right? You should have a good troubleshooting skills as well, right? Some of the process of us having issues along the way should also help you to learn that sometimes if I encounter this in the workplace, and trust me, and guarantee you that you will encounter it. You absolutely will encounter situations where you run into issues. Some of it is very less complicated. Some of it is very complicated. I've had numerous conversations and situations with my past students when they get jobs and they get into projects and they call me and they're freaking out. Man, I cannot figure out this thing. The client said I should do this. I'm like, did you check the security group? Did you check the route table? Did you check this? Right? They check it. I'm like, oh crap, yeah, it was just this, right? And they resolved the issue. It's not like I have some knowledge that you didn't have. You just knew it, but you did not think about it. That's it. You see, it times out. The resolution in this scenario could be somebody forgot to configure the route table properly, right? So in this scenario, if we do not put our internet gateway, we cannot get to that resource from the internet, which means that our VPC is still isolated. Means that whatever we created is not accessible to the internet unless we make it accessible. The way we do is by making sure that the route table is configured properly. Okay. Now, we should be able to get to our EC2 instance. This time around, availability zone 1B. Okay. Now, the second part of what we're going to do today, right? I want to simulate the second piece of this experience using a network load balancer. Okay, let's create a network load balancer through the same process, through the auto scaling group. And this time around, I'm still going to use the launch template, but I'm going to create a different version of the same launch template. and use the parameters for my network load balancer. Since I'm going to create a different cluster of EC2 instance, likely I also don't want to use the same EC2 instance, that instance security group that I'm using for my ALB cluster. I want to create a new security group for my network load balancer. Network load balancers do not have security groups. So we do not need a security group for a network load balancer. But the EC2 instances that is sitting behind the network load balancer will need it. Most of the times, we need network load balancers for connectivity purposes only. Okay. Network load balancers, most of the times we need it for connectivity purposes only. Okay, I'm going to create a new security group. I'm going to call this my network load balancer SG. NLB stands for network load balancer. ALB stands for application load balancer. Okay, so I'm going to copy this content in here and paste it in the description. Remember, there are little things that if you don't remember, you forget. Description is required parameter of a security group, although it doesn't say required in anywhere, but if you create it, it'll tell you you do not have description. Go back in there and check what the heck is the description. Put some value in there and you should be able to create your resource. Okay. Now in the VPC field, delete the content. All right. And select by VPC. And for our network load balancer resources, we are going to put we're going to allow HTTP or TCP, still the same thing, the same port from anywhere. All right, we're going to allow it from anywhere, allowing traffic from anywhere, because our resource is in a private network. Nobody outside the organization can get to it. You guys understand this? I'm going to post it in the description. Please read that through. Okay. If you're asking me why am I putting this, please read that description and you have an idea. Okay. So in my inbound rule, I'm going to create a protocol on the type with the type HTTP, because we are going to install a web application using that Bootstrap data, so we can access content in this file, in this server, from outside the world. Okay, so once you do that, I'm going to copy the content of my name, my group name. I always use the same group name. In fact, we always use the same group name as the name itself. Okay, there are certain resources that the name we can create a name up here. Some of it, like a security group, is really not the name. It's something else called group name. Okay, so different resources have different variation. I really don't know why AWS did not put another place here called name. Just making life difficult out here. Anyway, click on create security group. Create security group, and here we have our yep, I just named it wrong, but I'm just gonna delete it. Do it more time. Nobody just corrected me when I said and did the contradicting information, right? I said that there's no security group from NLB and I named it NLB and nobody really corrected me. Thanks, guys. My NLB Linux server, right? That's what I meant to write. Linux server SG, not my NLB. NLB do not have security group. They don't use security group. They don't allow security group, okay? So same thing we're going to do what we did before.
Why can't we just not rename it? Is it because we put the name and the name icon doesn't get edited?
We previously we cannot rename group names.
True.
Okay, we can name the name, we can rename the name, but previously we cannot rename the group name because of AWS. I don't know if that is possible now, but you can check, guys. You can
No,
even
it's
check.
not. I just checked. It won't
Alright.
edit.
Yeah. You guys can check, right? So if you have questions like that, you can always check here. Is it possible? Not possible, right? All right. You cannot change the group name. We can change the name, but we always want an integration of what the name is with the group name. Okay. Don't want the group name to be different than the name, unless in a scenario when we want to give it the same group name for some other purpose, maybe, and a different name, which I have yet to see why and understand why I would do that yet. Really no reason. Anywho, now let us go to our launch template.
The outbound still role still remains the same, right?
Yes, please. 95% of the time, we're always going to leave the outbound as is. Maybe 5% of the time, you find yourself in a scenario where we are controlling outbound when we are creating things like workspaces, but not really for now. Okay, let's click on launch template. All right. Click on launch template and click on our launch template we created. Click on action. Let us modify this current launch template. All right. And the new description for this launch template version, I'm going to call it my network load balancer launch template. Okay. And what do I want to change here? There's nothing really I want to change here. The only thing I want to change here is the security group, right? Where is it? Oh, Professor, where is it? My ALB, my Linux server. Let me refresh this one more time. Oh, can somebody tell me what I did wrong?
Yeah, is a my Linux server, SG.
No, not quite. I did something wrong. Can somebody tell me what I did wrong?
Mine showed up. Why do yours not
Right,
show?
mine did not show up. Only mine only. Can anybody tell me why? Haven't seen it yet. Can you see? Can
Oh,
you
you
see?
didn't select the right VPC in your drop down.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I did not select the right VPC in my drop down. Right, a lot of people have come to me that I've created my security group, but I cannot see it. It's no way I can't get to it. Right, just go back and get rid of it and make sure you create it in the right VPC, because we all make the mistakes. Right, I make mistake, you guys make mistake, everybody make mistake. The guys who've been working for 20 years, they make mistake too. Right, but if you make a mistake, the difference is you would always find a way to fix it, because we are all smart people, we are great architects, and we know what we are doing. All right. AWS.
Are you still going to leave the user data info in it?
Sorry?
The user data info.
Yes, the user data is still in that template. I'm just making a single modification on the template, right? Only
Hey,
one
Prof,
modification.
your
Yeah.
VPC is still on default. You need to change.
Huh. Thank you. You see, you guys are helping now. See, if I didn't have you guys, I wouldn't have been able to do this. Thank you. This is how we work as a team. Awesome. Thank you. So this is how we are able to perform things properly in a team, right? Because sometimes you might have working sessions like this with your coworkers and they're doing things and sharing the screen, or you might be the one sharing screen and doing things, and they might see certain things because you might be doing this and you're, in the back of your head, you're thinking about the jollof rice in the fridge, just not, thinking. Okay, guys, anyhow, let's navigate back to the launch template. Navigate back to the launch template. Make sure your launch template is selected and click on action. And Next, you want to click on the modify launch template. All right. We already have an existing launch template with it, really everything that we want, but there's a couple modifications that we want to do on there. We want to, in this new version that is going to create, we want to call it my network load balancer launch template. All right. I'm giving a memo, a description to exactly what I'm going to be using it for. There's nothing I really need to change on here. The only thing I need to change is my security group. Two things actually. My security group, right? I'm gonna remove that security group from my EC2 instance. Now I can see my Nlb Linux server SG. Next, right? I want to give it a different name, right? This name I created for the EC2 before was ALB. So I just want to change the AL to A to N. So it's going to be my Nlb Linux server. This is a Linux server to sit behind my network load balancer. That's it. There's nothing else I need to change. Still, I want to deploy the Bootstrap file. You click on Advanced, your Bootstrap should still be in here. Okay. Now, if you create this version and go back to your launch template, right? Go back to your launch template. There is a tab here called version. You realize now that there are two versions. You see, version 1 has some description in it. The version 1 says it is my application load balancer version. Version 2 says it's my network load balancer template. So if I need to use a template for my network load balancer, I'm aware that I'm going to be using version 2. Now, there is something called version default version. Default version means if we now, okay, get out of this. Say we want to go back to the auto scaling group and use that launch template. If I go to the auto scaling group, right? I click on create another auto scaling group, right? If I click on my launch template, by default, the version that will be selected will be will be version 1. Now, if I decide that I want to make that the default version, I want to change it from 1 to 2, because the 1 was the old version. It has some old things in there, and after some years and months or weeks or days, we came and updated this template with a new bootstrap or a new security group or some new content where we want to use going forward. So I can either delete this previous version, or I can come here and click on action and set as default. Because I've selected the second one, I can set as default, make the second one default. Now, if you take a look at it now, the default one is number 2. Now, if I exit this, right, make sure you refresh the page so that it has the content of whatever change has been made. You create a new auto scaling group. You come here, we select our launch template. You realize that the default template is using now is 2. We still have the ability to change it to 1. We can still change it to 1, but sometimes you can forget. So it's okay to make a default version and still keep a record of the old one. You don't have to delete it, but we could delete it. You can select this one and click on delete template, and we can get rid of it. But sometimes just to have a trace of what has been done throughout the years, you just got to leave it, but just make sure you keep it default. Or maybe at some point, if you need to go back and use this other version of it for some purpose, you can equally have the version without creating 10 different launch templates, right? You can create versions of the same template. Okay, guys, version control, that's what it's called. So let's create a new auto scaling group. Let's click on create auto scaling group. This time we're going to call it my Nlb ASG. Okay, I'm abbreviating everything. You guys would also learn how to see these things and maybe say it, recognize it when you see anywhere, right? ASG stands for auto scaling group. NLB again stands for network load balancer. I'm going to select my launch template, and obviously my version 2 is automatically selected with all my specified parameters in it. Click on next and make sure you select the right VPC. I'm going to go through the process a little bit faster because we've gone through it already, right? For our security group, we're doing this the second time, guys. So anybody that missed it the first time, take a second opportunity to go through it again. All right. So for the security group, this is the network configuration for my auto scaling group, not my load balancer. Okay. Or for my auto scaling group. When we get to the load balancer network, you see the load balancer listed right there on the top, right? But right now we are configuring the load balancer for our instances. So our instances is what we define in the auto scaling group. So in the availability zone and subnet here, click on the availability zone and subnet. We are going to select our private subnet. All right, private subnets. One, private subnet 2. Okay, make sure you have private subnet 1 and 2, because sometimes my eyes can see properly. I might select private and think I can select public. You can do the same mistake, but make sure you double check and make sure that you don't do it wrong. Because if you do it, if you don't do it right, you have to delete and redo it redo it again. So always double check everything that you specify before you go to the next step. All right, now we have the ability to configure our load balancer, including the network piece of it. All right, so we don't have an existing network load balancer. We do have an application load balancer, but we intend to create a network load balancer this time. So I'm going to click on attach a new load balancer, right? Attached to a new load balancer. And this time around, instead of an application load balancer or an HTTP or HTTPS load balancer, I'm going to call this a network load balancer. A network load balancer is also a TCP or TLS load balancer, right? It's not really called that, but you know, if you select a load balancer and configure it to terminate or to be accessed through these different type of protocols, we are referring to a network load balancer. Likely is what we're going to allow this to be internet facing, okay? And I'm going to call this my Nlb. And this time around, remember, we always place our load balancer in a public subnet. If it's meant to be accessed publicly, yeah, don't quote me on that, and you know, and say that load balancers and application load balancer are only meant to be exposed publicly. No, they have two different scenarios, and you might configure in each one, right? This is a web server, which means to be accessed from the internet. That's why we are using the internet facing load balancer. Okay, so imagine you're creating a website to advertise your product to people, so they need to be able to access it. But if I'm creating a load balancer to advertise the product to employees, this product needs to be sold to other employees. Nobody else out of the organization need to access it. So unless you're logged into the VPN, you can access this load balancer. Guess what? We are going to use the internal. Okay. So for now, and if we're using internal, then we might want to use the private subnet. So for now, select the internet facing. All right, and select your public. We created one public in each availability zone. So in A, select public, and in B, select public. All right, and we want to create a new target group. So click on the drop down where we want to forward all the traffic that is coming to the load balancer. Come to the load balancer, and the load balancer will forward it to something else, which is the target group. And in the target group, what do we have in it? We have our targets. What is another name for targets? EC2 instances, right? So click on create target group, and I'm going to call this my Nlb target group. Okay, so it's better for you to understand, right? You can give it your own name if you want. You can make it different, right, guys? You don't have to follow the naming convention. These things are just names we give, you know, for whatever purpose. I don't know. No tags necessary. Every company might have some tags that they want you to give to all resources that they create in AWS. So if that is the case, make sure that you don't skip through these optional guys here. Just, you know, screw in and give those tags. Might be 5 different things. Might be owner, it might be department, it might be application name. It's different. Tags is easy to maneuver, you know, work through your way. Put 30 seconds here. Click next. We're going to give you the same group sizing. Make it 2, desire 2, minimum 2, and maximum we're gonna make it 3. And nothing else. Click next, click next, click next, and click on create auto scaling group. All right. And here the magic starts. So, you know, you can now go back to your resources, go to your instances, see the process of generating a new instances, spin it up. See here, you see here.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Is it possible? I don't know. I don't know if it's a dumb question, but is it possible to have a private and public facing load balancer inside that your network load balancer if you're creating one? Have you seen that situation before, or it has to be either public or true or private or true?
Please ask the question again. I think
so when you're setting up your load balancer, when you're configuring your load balancer, you have where you selected the network and the availability zones, we're selecting public. Now for the instance, for the EC2, for the instances, we selected private because the application is being housed in the private server. For the load balancer, because it's interfacing with the public, you said, okay, we'll set it up as, in this case, we set it up as a public one. So my question is it possible to have both public and private subnet when you get to that availability zone and subnet section?
So, for better understanding, right? If you're going to create resources to put them only in the private network, there is no reason for you to have a public subnet. Likewise, if you are going to configure just a public environment, there's no need for you to have a private network. How do we make subnets private or public is to configure them in a route table. So if we are going to create an internal facing application load balancer, that means that we only need private subnets, isn't it? Unless we have a reason to create a public subnet. If we are creating a public subnet, it means that there's something that we want to put inside of it. If we are creating an internal facing application, right? Application load balancer, and we go and select a public subnet, it doesn't make sense because the configuration in the route table will not support what needs to be connected. So we are telling the route table that allow people from outside to connect to this resource, but we're telling the load balancer that don't allow people from outside to connect to this resource, right? So we are conflicting with the interests. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are it's a conflict of interest. So you cannot tell this guy that, hey, don't receive traffic from outside, and then you take this guy that, hey, bring traffic from outside. Somewhere it's going to terminate, somewhere it's not going to connect. So it's either you're allowing traffic and making everybody sync and allow traffic from outside, or you're disallowing our traffic and disallowing traffic or resources to be connected from outside, and equally configuring your resources to act like that also. So it's a conflict of interest. If you're configuring things to allow public traffic, you need to be able to make sure that the resources that you're creating will also accept that public access. Otherwise, the problem is not that you're doing a misconfiguration. You actually do a misconfiguration, but there's not going to be connectivity. You're going to run into, hey, sir, I'm trying to connect to this thing, but I can't connect to it. Right? They're trying to wonder what the heck is going on. That's because you've done so, but there's no scenario where you want to do that. All right, let's go to our network load balancer. All right, looks like it's active. Let's go to the DNS and see if we can get to it. Let's see if we can get to it. Look like it is still warming up. All right, let's go to the target group and see if the targets are actually ready. Targets are healthy. Oh, there you go. All right, looks like our content is ready to be consumed. So you can see a result here. So there's one other thing I want to show you guys about the load balancer, which is interesting, right? Our load balancers, you might find yourself in different scenarios where, your target group is showing unhealthy. Look like your load balancer. Somebody is punching this web browser. They're not able to see some content here. This is timing out. It's showing a 503, 504 error. You come to your target group. You come to your target group and you check in there. everything looks healthy, right? You're like, what the heck is going on, right? Everything looks healthy. Your load balancer seems to be configured properly. You can't seem to find what the problem is. You don't know if, the problem is coming from your server, which looks like it could be or it could not be, although your servers are healthy, right? It just shows that your servers can be accessed on that port, but still there could be something else, right? There's something here on the description of your load balancer. There is something called access logs. Access logs are troubleshooting logs. They are logs that you can pull to find out if there was an error that happened during the process of traffic hitting your load balancer. Was it successful, or what exactly happened? How many people or how many requests are hitting your load balancer, right? How often or when are these requests hitting your load balancer? You want to get an idea how many people are accessing your website, right? This is another level of logs that you can retrieve. There are many ways to find out that information, but from the load balancer perspective, sometimes we need to find out. You see, in this example, we have so many things that are configured with each other, right? They're working all together, right? One thing could be messed up and the rest of it is broken. So sometimes we go through the process of trying to find out where the problem is. So these access logs, if you click on this edit attributes here, these access logs, we can store them in something called S3. From next week, we're going to start talking about the other type of storage in AWS. We're going to learn about something called simple storage system, which is called S3, is where we store files. It's very cheap. It's like Google Drive. Think about Google Drive, right? That's AWS Google Drive. Let's think about iCloud. That's exactly what it is, right? But a lot more cheaper, okay? So that's where we store these files so we can go there and retrieve them, all right? We can, anyway, we'll talk about it further. But take notes, there's something else here. We talked about our EC2 instances. It's called termination, deletion protection. If you enable this option here, if we delete this instance, this elastic load balancer, it is not going to delete because we are protecting it from anybody deleting it. There is also something here called cross-zone load balancing, which makes it easier, which makes it possible that all requests that are coming to this load balancer are routed to all targets that are in the availability zone that are listed on this load balancers here equally. So if there are two availability zone here, A and B, right? And the availability zone matches the availability zone in your target group, in the EC2 instances based on which availability that are launched in, based on the availability zone that are here, all the requests that are coming to your load balancer would equally be distributed to the availability zone behind your load balancer of your targets, okay? So we enable this option, right? And click on save. One way you can test it is try to query this website again, and now it's showing A. If you click on it, and if your server is not cached, it will change to B. You see here, it changed to B. Before it was A, it changed to B. So it kind of distribute traffic to your targets equally, all right? So if I click on action, click on delete, click on yes, I want to delete, I get an error saying that I have deletion protection enabled. So I have to go back here, disable this option. Oh, not this one. Disable this option, click back on save, and before I can delete this guy. All right. So we have come to the end of class, and to get rid of these guys here, know that when you delete your auto scaling group, it's going to take a while to delete. So you can select each one, or you select both of them individually or together and click on delete. You don't need to go and delete your instances separately. You can delete both of them together, or you can delete separately. It's going to take a while to delete. So if it takes a while, don't feel like it's not deleting. Okay. It's good. It needs to deregister these targets from the